This took place when I was 10 years old at my local Chuck E. Cheese's. My mom had promised to take me as I had gotten all A's on my report card, and every time I did, I'd get a prize or some sort of outing. I've been to Chuck E. Cheese my whole life, and every kid knows it was their hangout spot. At the time, my family and I had been tight on money, so my mom agreed to take me, but that we couldn't go over the $50 limit. While it was a sucky situation, I didn't care about the money and just wanted to have fun. I remember my mom sitting down at one of the booths waiting for our pizza and giving me tokens to go play some games. I had been playing skee ball, the typical old but gold game. As I'm playing, one of the balls I had fell on the floor when I see an arm pick it up. As I look up, I see a man standing in front of me while handing over the ball. He wore a white shirt, black pants, and an obviously fake Rolex on his wrist. To be honest, he looked like a dad, and I kinda thought he was at first. He introduced himself as Robert and asked if I was alone. When I tell him I wasn't, he immediately says that he enjoyed skee ball as well and wondered if he could join me. I give him a friendly smile, giving him the hint that I didn't want to talk to him as I took the whole stranger danger thing seriously. He then says, "You know, my son enjoys this game as well. Let's go play with him. He's right over there." He then proceeds to grab my hand and sort of nudge me to follow him. However, something in my gut told me not to go with him no matter how innocent he might have seemed. He tried slightly tugging me, but I just kept resisting, making it clear that I didn't want to go with him. This thankfully got the attention of people, which made the man start to get nervous. One of the bystanders had yelled out for him to let me go. One bystander turned into another one, and then another one, which ended up becoming a whole scene. At this point, multiple staff and police had rushed over. This made him finally let go, and he then tries to run toward the exit doors where he was eventually caught by police. I see this man trying to resist arrest to the point where he eventually got tased. The sound of his crazed screams will forever be burned into my mind as he lay down being put in handcuffs. My mom had taken me away where she had spoken to the police and the head manager. Turns out, this wasn't the first time he's ever done this before. He's actually done this to several other kids and had even managed to take off with a few. Before you ask, yes, the kids were apparently found and safe. The Chuck E. Cheese had apologized for the situation and even offered a full refund. However, my mom wasn't having it, practically shielding me as we left the building. My mom was extra cautious with me for the next few years until I could learn to fend for myself. Needless to say, we never returned to that Chuck E. Cheese again. This just goes to show you how Chuck E. Cheese isn't always a place where a kid can be a kid. So, I've worked at Chuck E. Cheese for almost 4 years now as a standard cast member. It's a pretty fun job overall, with the exception of moderate chaos at birthday parties and management. Every week, there were different managers, some good and some bad, so it really depends on who you get. Other than that, it was decently reasonable. Throughout these 4 years, I had dealt with many different kids and seen some stuff you wouldn't see at any other establishment, but this experience takes the prize. One day, some of our staff had been let go for reasons I won't go into, leaving us with a skeleton staff. This basically meant that there were barely enough employees to fully operate the center. While we may have been short-staffed, it had been a relatively slow day, which certainly reduced some stress. It was around closing time, and so we all had to clean up everything in a span of an hour. Now, this was around the time where COVID was still in its prime, so all staff was required to sanitize everything in the store. This included stuff like games, tables, counters, and even parts of the animatronics. After sanitizing and sweeping most things, I head into the back room where all of the animatronics were. Upon approaching the room, I immediately noticed that the door leading into the room was slightly opened. This was weird, as both my manager and I were the only two people on site that had access to this room. I had assumed she had just maybe went in for something and forgot to lock it. As I walk inside, I begin to notice that the animatronics had seemed to have been tampered with. Assuming that they had to have been misplaced by my manager or something, I begin wiping them down while listening to my music. As I'm cleaning the inside of Chucky's head, I look to my right and sitting down is a man giving me a dead stare. I call for my manager, frantically screaming that there's someone in the back room. The man then slowly gets up and proceeds to forcefully put his hand over my mouth. Being a 5'7", 140-pound girl, I couldn't escape his grasp no matter how hard I tried. It then came to a point where he leaned in and said that if I didn't stop, that he'd kill me. I try my best to calm down while bawling my eyes out, not knowing what he was gonna do next. My manager, along with the outside security guard we have, entered the room. The security guard draws his gun, demanding he let me go and to put his hands up. He complies, and I nearly run straight into my manager's arms while hugging her. Our well-fit security escorts him out of the center, where police were then called. It turns out that this man had gotten a hold of a spare key in our office area when it was unattended. There were also high amounts of zinc phosphide found in the suits. It's a very dangerous rat poison and can be toxic to humans if breathed in or consumed. I could only assume his plan was to attempt to poison the staff who wore the suits. To make matters worse, he was also found with a large knife in his back pocket. It was that night where I quit right then and swore never to return, and my manager politely understood. However, I still have several remaining questions as to what had happened. How did nobody see him get a key? What were his intentions? And what would he have done had the security not been there? It still gives me goosebumps till this day. My name is Ron, and I've been an electrician for about 30 plus years now. What I do is basically repair any electrical errors that may occur in several establishments. These establishments ranged anywhere from schools all the way to malls. It's a pretty chill job for the most part if you knew what you were doing, but other than that, I enjoyed it very much. Throughout my years of work, I've never really had any sort of abnormal encounters, but that all changed in just one evening. One day, our company had received a call from a Chuck E. Cheese reporting an issue with a few of their lights. On that day, I was scheduled to go in and fix them, which shouldn't be too much of a problem as lights were my specialty. I arrive at the Chuck E. Cheese, which had been closed due to a staff-only meeting. After inspecting the lights, I go inside the ceiling trying to figure out if there was something in the ceiling causing the issue. Being a big guy and going into small spaces was really uncomfortable, especially if you were in a rush. I'd say a minute after of getting this feeling, I hear what sounded like footsteps coming from across the ceiling. I shine my light in the dark, empty ceiling, only to find nothing. At first I thought that it might have been some sort of animal, considering this was next to a wildlife preserve where this was home to unwanted critters. So there I am, attempting to repair the issue when I hear it clear as day, the laugh of a small child echoing through the dark. However, the only problem was that I couldn't see anyone or anything, even with my flashlight. There was seemingly nobody inside the ceiling but me. I ended up repairing the lights and packed up my equipment and got the hell out of there. On my way out, I tried my best to forget about what I had just heard and to focus on what's next. I didn't bother saying anything to the staff or anyone at my job for that matter, thinking they'd see me as crazy. But then again, can you blame them? Till this day, I'm still unsure what it exactly was that I heard, but fear was not enough to describe what I felt. To be honest, I don't know what I felt. It was sort of a mix of fear, confusion, and panic. While I didn't talk about this with many people, I did speak to my friend who claims that it was all in my head. However, I was certain it was not.
When I was a kid, I went to Chuck E. Cheese a number of times. It was pretty popular back then for kids to go to for birthday parties or for whatever reason. I always loved going there, and every part about it was cool. But one time, when I was about 8 years old, that all changed. I was invited to my friend's birthday party, and it would be at the local Chuck E. Cheese. He was a friend of mine and classmate from school. I think his name was Ben, and we weren't really that great of friends, but he invited like 20 people. The party was that Saturday, and the neighborhood that I lived in was really close by to the Chuck E. Cheese. In fact, I could walk there if I wanted to. So, on Saturday, my parents actually did in fact let me walk there. It took me under 10 minutes, and our neighborhood was very safe that I was aware of. I don't remember any crime happening or ever feeling scared to leave my house. I got to the Chuck E. Cheese and was one of the first kids there. I talked to Ben, and pretty quickly a bunch of other kids started showing up. After that, I don't remember a whole lot. We were just playing arcade games, eating pizza, and drinking soda. It was a pretty fun time, just like any other experience that I had at Chuck E. Cheese as a kid. There were other people there too, but for my friend's party, they had rented off a little room of space. He had cake as well, and the party lasted for probably 2 or 3 hours. Then, when people started to leave, I decided to go home. I remember I told Ben's parents that I was going to walk home, and they offered to give me a ride. I told them how close I lived, and they made sure that my parents knew I was walking home, but they said it was okay. So then I left. I was happy to walk back by myself, because it made me feel older than I actually was. And when I walked home on that day, everything was fine. I took the sidewalk past the Chuck E. Cheese and behind it. That led right into the residential neighborhood that I lived in. Then I just walked a few blocks and only had to turn once. It was still daytime and just seemed like a regular Saturday to me. I don't remember noticing anything out of the ordinary. I made it home, and after getting there, I don't really remember what I did for the rest of the day. Probably just the typical stuff of watching TV or playing video games. I lived with my parents and younger brother in a one-story house that wasn't really that big or small. I went to bed that night, and this is where things get really creepy. I had my bedroom all to myself, and my window was next to my bed and looked out to the backyard. At some point, in the middle of the night, I woke up. I'm not really sure why I did, but when I did, I was really groggy and kind of looked around my room wondering what time it was. I then sat up to look at my clock/radio that was on my nightstand next to me. It was then that I realized something was outside of my window. My blinds covered the window, but they were open partly. Then I remember looking over to see a large Chuck E. Cheese mask. It was the mask of the mouse, and somebody was standing there, wearing it over their head and staring into my window. The feeling that I got when I saw it was the most scared I had ever been, for sure. I was also shocked, and I just couldn't believe it. It was so random and bizarre. I moved back and got off of my bed. Then I ran away and into my brother's bedroom. He was fast asleep, and I just kind of stood in there for a while, just inside the doorway, not knowing what to do. Eventually, I went into the living room and turned on the TV. I didn't want to wake anybody else up, but I also didn't want to go back into my bedroom, and I couldn't sleep. I don't recall hearing anything else strange, and I didn't see the guy for the rest of the night. Eventually, I fell asleep on the living room couch. When my parents and brother got up, they asked me what I was doing on the couch, and I remembered the whole thing and told it to them. They were confused, and I think they believed me, but it was just such a weird situation. I even questioned myself many times if I actually saw what I think I did. I definitely was not half asleep though. I know that I was wide awake. We went outside and saw something extremely creepy. Just below my window on the grass, there were some Chuck E. Cheese tickets. I never saw the guy again or experienced anything like that after. I wonder if it was somebody from Chuck E. Cheese who followed me home or something. To me, that makes the most sense. But like I said, I didn't notice anything unusual. Still to this day, I'm left with many questions about that experience. When I was a kid, one of my classes in school won a field trip to Chuck E. Cheese. I don't remember at all how or why we won it, but I know that we were all very excited. I had only been to Chuck E. Cheese one previous time, and I think I was about 10 years old back then. When it was time for class that day, we all met in the classroom and then walked out to the bus. I remember that it was a great feeling leaving school during a school day to go to Chuck E. Cheese. We rode the bus for about 10 minutes to get there, and then we went inside. This Chuck E. Cheese was located near a strip mall at the local shopping area for our city. It wasn't very busy being a weekday during the daytime, and there was probably about 20 or 30 of us kids total. We all got a number of tokens to play the games, and there were a few pizzas for us as well. We all started running around playing the arcade games and stuff. It was turning out to be one of the best school days of my life to that point. But I remember that about 30 minutes in or so, I was looking for a new game to play. I just kind of wandered off to the corner by myself just to see everything that was over there. That particular area didn't have a whole lot, and there was nobody else really in that area. I walked past a couple of those car racing game machines, I think. Well, between them and another game, I saw a grown man crouched down like he was hiding. He was really hard to see, and I'm surprised that I even saw him at all, to be honest. When I did, I first started to walk past, but I realized I saw somebody and I stopped. Then I went closer to examine and see if there actually was a man there. When I did, I got within about 50 feet of the guy, and he turned and looked at me. I gave him probably a confused look, but didn't say anything. He then smiled and put his finger up to his mouth, signaling me to be quiet. I guess this guy was playing hide and seek with maybe a kid or something. It seemed really weird, but I didn't think too much of it. I kind of nodded back to him and then left him alone. I kept moving, trying to decide which game that I would play next. After not finding anything in that corner that I wanted to play, I started to move back over to the other games. But not far from that area, I found a game and started to play it. I was at that game for maybe 5 minutes or so. At one point of being there, I happened to look over to the quiet corner that I had been at before. I don't know why, but I just did. It was near where I had seen the man who had been hiding. But now I saw the guy again. He was standing up and with a girl who was not in my class. She appeared to be younger than me, and at first I figured that she was his daughter. But I noticed that they were walking towards the emergency exit, and the way the guy looked, I just had a bad feeling. Something just wasn't right, and I decided to walk over. I had no plan and didn't know what I was going to do or say. I started walking straight for the guy, and he then saw me. What happened next was really surprising. He had been holding on to the little girl's hand, and then he let her go. Then he walked towards the exit door and left. The girl remained inside, standing there. I guess it wasn't an emergency exit, because no kind of alarm or anything went off, but the guy was now gone. I walked over to the girl and asked her if she knew that guy. She didn't say anything to me, but shook her head no. After that, I walked with her back over to my teacher and told her about what had happened. The man was long gone, though. I'm not really sure what else was done, because I went back over to the arcade, and I don't remember a whole lot of details after. But I'm glad that I saw the man both times. Something about him just seemed suspicious from the start. I trusted my instincts, and my instincts were right. This is something that happened almost 10 years ago now. It was 2015, and at the time, I was a divorced mother of a 10-year-old boy. I enjoyed spending time with my son, and we would do fun things together all the time. One night, I took him to Chuck E. Cheese. It was fairly busy, and there were a lot of other people there. My son always loved going there, and I would usually just sit at a table as he played the games. He was old enough that I didn't need to always keep an eye on him, so I sat at one of the tables and went on my phone. On this night in particular, I was pretty much by myself at one of the tables. My son was in the arcade somewhere, and nobody was sitting immediately near me. At one point, though, a man came up and sat at my table. I didn't see where he had come from. I just noticed when he sat down, and I looked up to see him there. He looked to be around my age, so roughly late 30s, and had really short blonde hair. I was a little bit confused by why he was sitting at my table, and I looked up at him. That's when he just stated that his kid loved Chuck E. Cheese. I said that mine did too, and we talked very briefly about our kids. I don't remember much of what he said, because I was still confused as to why he had come up to me in the first place. He must have sensed my confusion, because he then stuck out his hand for me to shake and introduced himself to me. He said that his name was Dave, and I gave my name to him. Then he said that he better get going, and he got up and walked away. I watched him walk back into the arcade and out of my sight. The whole encounter was a little bit strange. I stayed where I was for probably another 30 minutes or so. I didn't see Dave at all for the rest of the night. After my son had used up all of his tokens, he came over and got something with his tickets, and then we left. It was the next day that I was on Facebook when I saw that I had a friend request from a guy named Dave. At first, I didn't know who he was, so I clicked on his profile. I then realized that it was the same man who had talked to me at Chuck E. Cheese the previous night. This was kind of weird, because I had only given him my first name, and I wasn't really sure how he found me. We didn't have any mutual friends or anything. There wasn't a whole lot on his profile as far as information or pictures either. I don't really know why, but I accepted his friend request. Unless it was obviously a robot or something, I would kind of automatically accept everyone. But that proved to be a mistake, as only about an hour later he started sending me messages. He started out by saying hi and asking what I was doing. I wasn't interested in talking to him, to be honest, and I didn't respond. He kept sending me messages though. By the next day, there was about 10 more unread messages that I had from him. I finally decided to respond and asked him why he was sending me so many messages. He replied saying because I wasn't responding. He then asked me if I wanted to hang out with him, and I told him no thanks, and that's when his mood started to change. He started cursing me out and calling me things that I won't repeat here. I told him that if he didn't stop messaging me, I was going to block him. That's when he said something that really made me worry. He said something like, "Go ahead, I know where you live." It gave me the chills to read it, because based on his behavior, I thought that maybe he did somehow know. He then said that he didn't even have a kid. I blocked him and reported his account for harassment to Facebook. I just hoped that that would be it and I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. For a few days, I didn't hear from Dave or see him at all. But then, one night, he came to my house. Luckily, my son wasn't home at the time and was at a friend's house. It was probably about 8 or 9 p.m. and I would be leaving to pick up my son soon. There was a knock on my front door to the house, and I knew instantly based on how late it was that it was probably Dave. My heart was racing as I walked over to look out one of the front windows. He knocked on the door again as I saw him standing there. I wasn't going to answer it, but soon he started yelling. I heard him say that he knew I was home and to open up the door. I was thinking that this guy had to have been crazy or something. He started looking around to the windows, and I quickly moved away. I knew that this was grounds to call the police, and I got my phone from the counter and dialed 911. As I was talking to the operator, Dave started yelling something else, but I wasn't paying attention to him. I was told that a police officer was in the area and would head over. I figured they would be there in a couple of minutes, and I started to feel better. Meanwhile, Dave kept knocking on the door. He was clearly angry now, and I heard him yell at me that if I didn't open the door for him, he was going to break in. That's when the relief that I felt went away, and I was just as worried as I had ever been. I still didn't bother to say anything back to Dave, though. Instead, I moved into my hallway and entered the bathroom. Then I closed the door and locked it, and hoped that Dave wouldn't actually try to break in. The bathroom had a small window that faced our backyard. At first, when I was in there, things were quiet now that I was farther away from Dave. I could barely hear the knocking, but then the knocking stopped. Probably about 2 minutes later, I then heard noises coming from the backyard. It sounded like Dave was possibly banging on the kitchen window. This only lasted for a few seconds though, and then it stopped. I didn't hear anything for a few minutes after that. The next thing I knew, I got a call from the police saying that they were there. I left my bathroom and saw several officers outside of my house with flashing lights. They had actually caught Dave, and I was told that he had been hiding in my backyard. I pressed charges against him for harassment and later got a restraining order. I'm happy to say that I've never seen him since then. The first and only time I ever went to Chuck E. Cheese was back in the year 2005. I was a little kid at the time, and I remember that my older brother got invited to one of his friend's birthday parties, which was going to be at the Chuck E. Cheese. My parents were invited as well, so they said that I could come with. I was excited to go there because I had always wanted to. It seemed like so much fun with the arcade games, the pizza, and everything. I remember that the party was on a Sunday, I think, and when we got there, my parents got a pizza, and my brother went to hang out with his friends. I knew some of the kids that were there, but they were mostly my brother's friends, so I could kind of do my own thing. My brother's friend who the party was for was named Tyler, and his parents got a bunch of tokens for everyone. They gave me a little paper cup with a bunch of tokens in it, and I began going around playing some of the machines. I was trying to find the best machines that would have the best payout of tickets. I saw that the Chuck E. Cheese had some pretty cool prizes you could win with the tickets. After playing maybe half the arcade games they had in there, I found this one in the corner that I really liked a lot. I was getting on a winning streak, and after the second time playing it, I had quite a few tickets and played it for a third time. I was right in the middle of the game when all of a sudden, the whole thing suddenly went black and froze. It was really strange. I pushed some of the buttons and messed around with it a little bit, but nothing worked. The screen was completely black, and nothing I did seemed to affect it. I was a little kid, so I didn't really know how the machines worked, but I just figured it was broken. Then, I saw a man appear next to the machine. He was wearing a shirt with a Chuck E. Cheese logo and asked me what had happened. I told him the machine was broken, and he took a look at it and saw how it wasn't working. He pushed a few of the buttons and then went around to the back of the machine. It seemed like he was working on it, and a short time later, he returned and said that it appeared as though the machine was broken and it would be out of order for a while. Then he apologized to me and told me he could get me the tickets that I would have won and some extra tokens for the trouble. I was glad to hear this because I would have already won a good amount of tickets from the game before it broke. The guy started to walk away and told me to follow him. We went off to the side of the room and then into a hallway which led to the back. I stopped at the entrance of the hallway that said employees only, but then I was told to keep going. I followed the guy down the hall and then we reached a side door. The guy then backed up and grabbed my arm tightly. He opened the door, which turned out to be an exit of the building. I could see outside, and he pulled my arm and forced me to follow him. I asked the man what was going on, but he didn't answer me. I was starting to panic. The guy had a strong grip on my arm, and it looked like we were going out to his car. I really didn't want to go any further, and I was desperate. As we got closer, I suddenly took my leg and kicked the man right in the groin area. It really took him by surprise, and he dropped to his knees for a second, and his grip became much looser. I pulled away from the man and started running back, but I decided to go around to the front of the Chuck E. Cheese. Once I had made it around to the front, I went in the entrance doors and ran back inside to my parents. When I got there, they saw me and asked me what was wrong. After I told them what had happened, they decided to call the police and talk with the managers as well. I remember I had to talk with the police for a while. Looking back at that day, I realized that the man didn't work at Chuck E. Cheese at all, and he most likely just unplugged the game I was playing himself.
If you really like my content and want to support me, please like this video and click the subscribe button. It helps me to grow my channel and is essential in reaching a wider audience. Most of you watching my videos aren't subscribed to my channel, and that's why my animations can't reach their full potential. They aren't recommended to more people who would surely love my content as much as you do. You can always unsubscribe at any moment. Thank you in advance, and enjoy the rest of the video.
I used to work at a Chuck E. Cheese. I enjoyed the job a lot. It was a fun place to work, maybe because I had a lot of good memories of going there as a kid. I would do a little bit of everything there, including quite a bit of maintenance and cleaning. One night, I was working on a quieter evening. I was in the process of cleaning up a table area when I saw a customer approaching me. I stopped what I was doing and saw that there was a pretty average-looking guy standing in front of me. The guy told me that he had just been in the men's bathroom in the back, and he wanted to let me know that it was really dirty and could use a cleaning. I told the guy thanks for letting me know, and then he walked away. Keeping the bathroom clean was one of my jobs, and it wasn't one of my favorite parts of the job, but it actually usually wasn't that bad. After I was done clearing the table, I walked down the hallway to our little cleaning closet where I got a cleaning cart that I would use for the restrooms. By this time of night, the place wasn't too busy, and there were only a few kids and parents in the arcade or eating areas. When I got to the men's bathroom in the back, I went inside and saw that it was empty and nobody else was in, which was good. But when I looked around, everything seemed fine. I was happy to see this, but also confused. The more I looked around after going all around the bathroom, I saw that it was completely clean and nothing was dirty at all. After that, I took my cart and went to leave. But when I tried opening the bathroom door to get out, it wouldn't move. All I had to do was push it open, but it seemed like there was someone or something on the other side blocking it and holding it back, because no matter how hard I pushed, it just wouldn't budge. I kept trying, but nothing was happening. Then suddenly, all the lights went out. It was pitch black in there, and I couldn't see a thing. I kept on trying the door, but nothing was happening. I started banging on the door and yelling at that point, hoping that somebody would hear me. Finally, after about a minute straight of this, the door suddenly burst open, and I went flying out there and fell flat on my face on the other side of the doorway. I looked around, but didn't see anybody nearby. I saw one of my coworkers, Jake, not too far away, kind of walking towards me. He came up and asked if I was okay, looking confused. I told him what had just happened to me. Jake said he had seen me go through the door, and he had heard somebody yelling, and that's why he was approaching the bathroom. He said when he got towards the bathroom doors, he saw a large man running away. I was really creeped out when I heard this. I actually looked around after that for the guy who had told me that the bathrooms were dirty, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I ended up just working the rest of the night like normal after that. But I've often wondered what exactly happened there.